What happens when one of comedy's biggest stars walks onto a late night set expecting a fun conversation, only to find himself under attack from a host who seems determined to humiliate him on live television? In just 40 seconds of one particular exchange, Greg Gutfeld would say something so shocking, so completely out of line, that Kevin Hart would make a decision that would leave the studio audience gasping and the cameras still rolling on an empty chair. The evening started like any other taping. Kevin Hart walked out to thunderous applause, his infectious energy filling the studio as he waved to the crowd and took his seat. He was there to promote his latest project, expecting the usual banter, some laughs, maybe a funny story or two. What he got instead was something nobody in that room was prepared for. Greg Gutfeld opened with what seemed like a standard question, asking Kevin about his recent comedy tour. Kevin launched into an enthusiastic response, talking about how amazing it felt to connect with audiences again, to see people laughing and forgetting their troubles for a couple of hours. His hands moved expressively as he spoke, his smile genuine and warm. But then Gutfeld cut him off, mid-sentence. "You know, Kevin, I've always wondered something," Gutfeld said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that made the audience shift uncomfortably. "Do you think people laugh at your jokes, or do they just laugh at your height?" The studio went quiet. Kevin's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered, clearly trying to keep things light. "Man, come on, we're really doing height jokes?" I thought we were past that." "I'm just saying," Gutfeld continued, his tone dripping with condescension. "It's convenient, isn't it? You can blame everything on being short. Bad joke? Oh, it's because I'm short. Movie doesn't do well? Must be the height thing. It's like your safety net." Kevin shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. "Greg, I don't know what kind of interview you think this is, but I came here to have a good time, to talk about my work. I've been doing this for over 2 decades. My height has nothing to do with my success." The audience began to clap in support of Kevin, but Gutfeld raised his hand to quiet them. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. This is comedy, right? You dish it out all the time. Surely you can take it." "There's a difference between comedy and just being disrespectful," Kevin replied, his voice steady but firm. "I make fun of myself all the time, but there's an art to it. There's love in it. What you're doing right now, this isn't that." Gutfeld laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "So now you're going to lecture me about comedy? That's rich. Tell me, Kevin, how many times have you made jokes about other people? How many times have you poked fun at someone's appearance or their choices? But suddenly when it's directed at you, it's crossing a line?" Kevin took a deep breath, visibly trying to maintain his composure. "I punch up, Greg. I don't punch down. I make fun of myself. I make fun of situations. But I don't sit here and try to tear someone down just because I can. That's not comedy. That's just mean." "Oh, please," Gutfeld scoffed. "Spare me the moral superiority. You Hollywood types are all the same. You want to be edgy and push boundaries until someone pushes back, and then suddenly you're all about respect and boundaries." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Audience members whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable with where this was going. Kevin's publicist, sitting off stage, stood up, her expression alarmed. Kevin leaned forward, his eyes locked on Gutfeld. "You know what, man? I came here as a guest. I came here with respect for you and your show. But you're not interested in having a conversation. You just want to take shots." "I'm interested in having a real conversation," Gutfeld shot back. "Not some sanitized, publicist-approved nonsense where we all pretend like everything is perfect. You make millions of dollars telling jokes, but you can't handle a little ribbing? That's pathetic." "Ribbing?" Kevin's voice rose slightly. "You're not ribbing me. You're trying to humiliate me. There's a difference, and if you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you." Gutfeld leaned forward, his voice taking on an even more aggressive edge. "You want to know what I think? I think you've gotten so big, so successful, that you've forgotten what it's like to be challenged. Everyone around you probably tells you how great you are all day long. Well, not here. Not on my show. The audience was dead silent now. Even the cameramen seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep filming or look away. Kevin stood up slowly, removing his microphone. His movements were deliberate, controlled. You know what, Greg? You're right about one thing. I am successful. I've worked hard to get where I am. I've earned the respect of my peers and my fans, and I don't need to sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has some kind of issue. Oh, here we go, Gutfeld said mockingly. The big star is going to storm off because he can't handle a tough interview. How predictable. This isn't a tough interview, Kevin said, his voice calm but firm. A tough interview asks challenging questions about my work, my choices, my career. This is just you trying to make yourself feel important by tearing down someone else. And I'm not going to be a part of it. Gutfeld's face reddened. You're being ridiculous. Sit down. We're in the middle of a show. No, Kevin said simply. I'm done. You can't just leave, Gutfeld sputtered, his composed demeanor cracking. We have a contract. Jen, you agreed to be here. Kevin turned to face him fully, his expression serious. Watch me. The audience began to murmur loudly now, some people starting to applaud. Gutfeld's producers rushed onto the stage, trying to salvage the situation. One of them approached Kevin, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. But Kevin shook his head. I appreciate you trying, but I'm not staying. This isn't what I signed up for. Gutfeld, perhaps realizing he had pushed too far, tried a different approach. His tone shifted, becoming almost patronizing. Kevin, come on. Don't be so dramatic. We're just having a conversation. This is what happens on talk shows. We go back and forth. Kevin looked at him for a long moment. No, Greg, this isn't back and forth. Back and forth requires two people with mutual respect. You've made it clear you don't respect me. And honestly, after sitting here for the last few minutes, I don't respect what you're doing either. So that's it? Gutfeld asked, his voice rising. You're just going to run away? I'm not running away from anything, Kevin responded. I'm walking away from a situation that doesn't serve me or anyone watching. There are plenty of shows that would love to have me as a guest. Shows where the host actually knows how to conduct an interview. Gutfeld stood up now, his face flushed with anger. You think you're too good for this show? Is that it? You think you're above this? I think I deserve basic respect, Kevin said. And so does every guest who sits in that chair. But you don't seem to understand that concept. One of the producers stepped between them, clearly trying to de-escalate. Gentlemen, please. Let's take a breath here. But Gutfeld wasn't finished. You know what your problem is, Kevin? You can't handle anyone who doesn't worship at your feet. You're so used to everyone kissing up to you that the moment someone treats you like a regular person, you fall apart. Kevin laughed, but there was no humor in it. Treating someone like a regular person means having a normal conversation. What you're doing is trying to provoke me, trying to get a reaction so you can have some viral moment for your show. Well, congratulations. You got your moment, but not the way you wanted. The audience erupted in applause. Several people stood up, clearly supporting Kevin. Gutfeld looked around, seemingly surprised by the reaction. Oh, so now you're all on his side? Gutfeld addressed the audience. He's walking out in the middle of a show, being completely unprofessional, and you're applauding him? A woman in the front row shouted back, You've been rude to him from the start. Other audience members echoed her sentiment. Let him leave, someone else called out. You're being terrible. Gutfeld's face contorted with frustration. He pointed at Kevin. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the problem with celebrities today. They want all the perks of fame, but none of the accountability. They want to be interviewed, but only on their terms. Only with questions they approve. Kevin had started walking toward the exit, but he stopped and turned back. Accountability? You want to talk about accountability? How about you being accountable for the way you treat your guests? How about you being accountable for turning what should have been a fun conversation into whatever this is? I'm holding you accountable for your sensitivity, Gutfeld countered, for your inability to handle anything that isn't praise. And I'm holding you accountable for your cruelty, Kevin replied. There's a reason people love comedy, Greg. It's because at its best, it brings people together. It makes us laugh at ourselves and the world around us. But what you're doing, that's not comedy. That's just being mean-spirited and calling it entertainment. Another producer approached Gutfeld, whispering urgently in his ear. He brushed her away. No, we're finishing this conversation. There's nothing left to say, Kevin said. He looked out at the audience. I'm sorry you all had to witness this. You came here for a good time, and you deserved better than what happened here tonight. The audience applauded again, louder this time. Several people shouted words of support. We love you, Kevin. You did the right thing. Stand up for yourself. Gutfeld's voice cut through the noise. You're really going to make this about you being the victim? You're really going to play that card? Kevin turned back one last time. I'm not a victim, Greg. I'm someone who knows their worth and refuses to be disrespected. There's a difference. Maybe you should learn it. With that, Kevin walked off the stage. The cameras followed him as he moved through the wings, his publicist meeting him and putting a supportive hand on his shoulder. Behind him, the studio erupted in chaos. Some audience members were booing Gutfeld. Others were still applauding Kevin's exit. Gutfeld stood at his desk, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. Well, Gutfeld said, his voice tight as he addressed the cameras, I guess that's the show, folks. Kevin Hart, everyone. Walking off because he couldn't handle a real conversation? But his words were drowned out by the audience's reaction. The energy in the room had completely shifted. What was supposed to be a standard late-night talk show interview had turned into something else entirely. A moment where a guest stood up for himself against a host who had crossed every line. Backstage, Kevin sat in his dressing room, his team gathered around him. You okay? His publicist asked. Kevin nodded. Yeah, I'm good. I couldn't sit there anymore. That wasn't an interview. That was an ambush. You did the right thing, another member of his team assured him. Nobody should have to sit through that. Kevin took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I've been in this business a long time. I've done hundreds of interviews. Thousands, probably. And I've dealt with tough questions, controversial topics. All of it. But that wasn't about getting to know me or challenging me on anything substantive. That was just mean. Back on the stage, Gutfeld was trying to regain control of his show, but the damage was done. The audience remained restless, many of them talking amongst themselves about what they had just witnessed. Some were already on their phones, no doubt sharing what had happened on social media. A producer finally convinced Gutfeld to cut to commercial. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, he stormed off the stage, leaving his crew to figure out how to salvage the rest of the taping. In the hallway outside his dressing room, Kevin stood with his team, discussing their next move. He had taken off his jacket and loosened his tie, looking more relaxed now that he was away from the hostile environment of the stage. Do you want to make a statement? His publicist asked. The story is going to get out. It probably already is getting out. Kevin thought for a moment. Not right now. Let people see what happened. Let them draw their own conclusions. The truth speaks for itself. One of the show's producers, a woman named Sarah, who had always been kind to Kevin during his previous appearances on other shows, approached cautiously. Kevin, I just want to apologize. That should never have happened. That's not what any of us wanted. Kevin offered her a small smile. I appreciate that, Sarah. And I know this wasn't your fault. But I hope someone talks to him about how he treats people. Because if this is how he acts with guests, it's only a matter of time before something like this happens again. Sarah nodded, looking distressed. I've already spoken to the executive producer. They're dealing with the situation. Good, Kevin said, because nobody should have to go through what I just went through. Not for entertainment, not for ratings, not for anything. As Kevin and his team prepared to leave the building, he paused to thank the security guards and staff members he passed. Despite what had just happened, he remained gracious and professional, taking a moment to shake hands and exchange a few kind words. Outside, a small crowd had already gathered, somehow having heard about what happened inside. When Kevin emerged, they cheered. He waved, managing a genuine smile despite the tension of the evening. "You stood up for yourself," someone shouted. "That took guts," another person called out. Kevin stopped for a moment, acknowledging them. "Thank you all. I appreciate the support. Sometimes you just have to know when to walk away, you know?" The crowd cheered again. One young man stepped forward. "Can I just say, I've been a fan for years, and seeing you stand up for yourself like that meant something, man. That really meant something." Kevin shook his hand. "I appreciate that. Look, I'm all for a good joke, even at my own expense. But there's a line between joking around and just being disrespectful. And once that line gets crossed, you have to stand up for yourself." As Kevin's car pulled away from the studio, he looked back at the building one last time. Inside, Gutfeld was probably still fuming, trying to figure out how to spin what had happened. The producers were likely in damage control mode, and the audience members were filing out, already sharing their first-hand accounts of the dramatic confrontation. But Kevin felt at peace with his decision. He had walked into that studio as a professional, ready to do his job and promote his work. He had tried to maintain composure even as things got uncomfortable. He had given Gutfeld multiple opportunities to course correct, to turn the interview into something productive. And when none of that worked, when it became clear that the host was more interested in scoring points than having a genuine conversation, Kevin had done the only thing that made sense. He had walked away. The car ride was quiet at first. Kevin's team seemed unsure of what to say, still processing what had happened. Finally, his manager spoke up. "That was intense." Kevin laughed softly. Yeah, it was. But you know what? I don't regret it. Not for a second." "Good," his publicist said firmly. "Because you shouldn't. What he did was completely out of line." Kevin looked out the window at the city passing by. "I've been thinking about something. You know how many young comedians look up to us? How many people are trying to make it in this business? What kind of message would I be sending if I just sat there and took that? If I let someone treat me that way and didn't say anything?" His manager nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. It's bigger than just one bad interview." "Exactly," Kevin continued. "It's about setting a standard. It's about showing people, especially younger performers, that you don't have to accept disrespect just because someone has a platform, or because you're there to promote something. Your dignity matters more than any promotional opportunity." The conversation in the car continued as they drove through the night, Kevin and his team processing the evening's events, discussing the implications, and planning their next steps. But through it all, Kevin remained calm and confident in his decision. Back at the studio, the chaos was slowly dying down. The audience had been dismissed, many of them still talking animatedly about what they had witnessed. Gutfeld had retreated to his office, his producers trying to figure out how to address the situation in the next day's show. The crew members who had witnessed everything firsthand were divided in their reactions. Some felt Gutfeld had gone too far, that he had unnecessarily antagonized a guest who had come in good faith. Others tried to defend him, saying it was just his style, that Kevin should have known what he was getting into. But one thing was clear to everyone. This wasn't just another talk show interview gone slightly wrong. This was a significant moment, a line in the sand that had been drawn. A guest had stood up to a host, had refused to be mistreated, and had walked away rather than compromise his self-respect. The technical crew began breaking down the set. their movements mechanical after the emotional intensity of what they had just filmed. The stage manager sat at his desk, writing notes about the incident for the production report. The makeup artists cleaned their stations, discussing in hushed tones what they had seen. One of the camera operators, a veteran of 30 years in television, shook his head as he packed up his equipment. "I've filmed a lot of interviews," he said to his colleague. "A lot of tense moments. But that was something else. I've never seen a guest just walk off like that." His colleague nodded. "Can't say I blame him, though. That was rough to watch." In another part of the building, Gutfeld's executive producer was on the phone, likely with network executives, trying to explain what had happened and how they planned to handle it. The conversation was clearly not going well, based on the expression on her face and the increasing volume of her responses. Meanwhile, Sarah, the producer who had apologized to Kevin, sat in her office reviewing the footage. She watched the interview from the beginning, seeing how quickly it had deteriorated, how Gutfeld's questions had become increasingly hostile, and how Kevin had tried repeatedly to steer things back to a more positive place before finally deciding he had had enough. She made notes, documenting everything, knowing that this footage would be analyzed and discussed extensively in the coming days. As she watched Kevin's final moments on stage, his dignity intact even in his frustration, she couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for how he had handled an impossible situation. The makeup artist who had worked with Kevin before the show sat in the green room, thinking about their brief conversation before he went on stage. He had been excited, energetic, ready to have fun. She wondered if there had been any warning signs, anything that might have predicted how badly things would go. But there hadn't been. Kevin had been nothing but professional and kind, as he always was. In the parking garage, the security guard who had waved goodbye to Kevin stood at his post, thinking about what the comedian had said on his way out. Kevin had stopped, even after everything that had happened, to thank him for his work and wish him a good night. That small gesture spoke volumes about the kind of person Kevin was, especially in contrast to how he had been treated on stage. The night wore on, and slowly the studio emptied out. The lights were turned off one by one, leaving the stage in darkness. The chair where Kevin had sat remained empty, a silent testament to what had transpired there. In different parts of the city, the people who had been in that studio audience were arriving home, immediately telling their families and friends about what they had witnessed. Their accounts were passionate, detailed, and almost universally supportive of Kevin's decision to leave. And somewhere across town, Kevin Hart was finally getting home, tired but resolute. He had stood up for himself in a moment when many people might have simply endured the disrespect for the sake of professionalism or publicity. But Kevin had made a different choice, a harder choice, and one that he knew was right. As he prepared for bed, he thought about the interview one more time. He thought about all the moments where he could have handled it differently, all the points where he could have simply ignored the hostility and pushed through. But each time he replayed it in his mind, he came to the same conclusion. Walking away had been the right decision. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, possibly new controversies. But tonight, Kevin Hart could rest, knowing that he had maintained his integrity, that he had set a boundary and enforced it, and that he had shown anyone watching that self-respect matters more than any television appearance ever could.